So, don't like to be late, as everyone knows that I'm what I'm like. So I'll just check we're recording this and we're all ready to go. So I'm going to use a little bit of different technology this week because I've got a special guest along for later in the talk, which you will hear. So to start, this webinar is on the horse's foot. No foot, no horse, and it's a topic that I'm quite passionate about. I quite enjoy. Also gives me a lot of heartache at times dealing with foot lameness because they are very complicated. So when I started, I have to come clean, when I started doing this webinar and going through it, I realized to do the entire topic in one webinar was just too much. So I've actually split it up. There will be another webinar next month, and on next month I'll look at diagnosis of foot conditions, how we diagnose them, the interpretation of nerve blocks, x-ray changes, and also the common conditions. So I apologize if you've come for that there, but we're going to concentrate more, which might be more benefit for you guys as horse owners, on the anatomy of the foot, all the intricacies of the foot, and also showing the performance horse. So I hope you enjoy this. And once again, if you would like to ask any questions, please feel free. You can ask questions and I will answer them as we go. So, as I said, this webinar is totally on the anatomy and showing the performance horse. It may be a little bit shorter than normal, but we'll be running for about 45, 50 minutes. If I wanted to do the whole foot, I think we would have been here for 2 hours, so I had to cut it, I'm afraid. So, the anatomy. Let's start. So the basic anatomy, it's really important you guys understand it. When we look at it, we've got the pedal bone here. So this is the extensor process up here, and it goes all the way back to the heel. Next, your navicular bone, the swear word for horse owners, navicular. And so this is a very important bone to understand and know. It is a great function. It is a function as a lever. So then we look at the joints. So the first joint we want to look at is your coffin joint. Now, the important thing to understand about the coffin joint is it extends all the way to the back of the foot. So it's all the way around here. So part of the navicular bone is in the coffin joint, or more importantly, the coffin joint interacts with the navicular bone all the way to the back here. Next, we've got the navicular bursa. Now, it's technically not a joint, but it has joint synovial fluid in it. So we classify it as a joint in the foot because it responds similar to treatment as the coffin joint. Then, obviously, you've got your pastern joint. Now, just to give you an appraisal, this is the heels of this horse when we've taken the x-ray, how close that pastern joint actually is. It's quite far down when you look at a leg, and you probably don't appreciate that at times. So, moving on, we want to move on to the ligaments, okay? So the ligaments are an important part to understand. 3 main ligaments that we worry about in the foot. We've got the collateral ligaments. So that is basically, if you're standing beside your horse and you're looking down at the foot, they're at about 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock. So if you've got an injury there, you'll get a lump along the coronary band. And part of this ligament, this collateral ligament, is actually within the joint of the coffin joint. So when we medicate or we treat collateral ligament, it's really important that we understand that we potentially could be in the joint. So we can actually use that to the benefit down the track and use the joint as a means of treatment of this area. Then we've got the 2 sesamoidean ligaments supporting the navicular bone. So just on the side view, we'll just classify them together, but basically they're in 3 parts: medial being the inside, middle, and lateral parts. And they're all important. And if you go to MRIs, you can see lesions in different parts. So for this one here, we're using, for this one here, we're just going to assume that we've just got 2 parts. So we've got the proximal sesamoidean ligament and also the distal sesamoidean ligament. So, where to next? We then got the main tendon that we worry about, your deep digital flexor tendon. So deep digital flexor tendon is very important for lameness issues and also laminitis. As you can see here, as a single, it runs right down past the navicular and through the navicular bursa and inserts down on the pedal bone. Now that's important to understand because inflammation of the navicular bone or inflammation of the navicular bursa, more to the point, can be caused by tendon lesions. And equally, the deep digital flexor can become adhered to the navicular bone due to the fact that it passes through there. And that's why the navicular bone's there, is to help this tendon run around the corner and get round, and it acts like a pulley system. So just to take a step back and put all those, it's okay to look at, x-rays and say, well, there's the things. So let's just put it in real life. This is real life horse's foot. You've got your pedal bone here, and I'm sorry, I'm no great artist, okay? The navicular bone probably should be a little bit lower, but it is there. And you got your navicular bursa, your deep digital flexor comes down here, your collateral ligaments, and your pastern joint there. Okay, that's probably a little bit high, I have to be honest. I'm no artist. So there's one part of the foot that's really important to understand that we can't really assess and visualize unless you go to MRI. And the same with tendon ligaments, but one part that's often not talked about, which is very important, is the digital cushion. What's the job of the digital cushion? The digital cushion is there purely to function to help pump blood back up the foot. It's also part of the absorption for shock and stuff like that. So we have a healthy digital cushion is a healthy foot. So farriers will talk about, getting the digital cushion to function properly or creating a false digital cushion. And by that there, we'll be putting material in the sole of the foot and encouraging that pump effect and getting the movement going. So this foot here, it's quite broken back. It's not particularly well shod. It could be improved with more length and support, but we've got a digital cushion in this region, and that's one thing. If we look at this foot now, it's a lot more upright. This digital cushion will actually be shrunk and not be functioning properly because there's a long distance between the digital cushion and the ground. And as soon as it loses function and ground contact, it doesn't work as well. It just can't work as well. So that's one of the things to take into consideration. We can't really image it and we don't talk about it a lot, but the digital cushion is very important for a healthy foot. Okay. This is a big topic. It's quite I wouldn't say in vogue, it's a very important topic, and it's really something I encourage. How do we shoe the athletic horse? Because at the end of the day, a horse doesn't just stand on its feet. It actually has to move. It has to interact with different surfaces. So different horses will So your dressage horse on the top will generally interact with a synthetic sand surface. Show jumpers and eventers often will be out on grass, occasionally different surfaces. So the shoeing for them will be very different on what we can do safely. And really the important bit about the shoeing athletic horse, it's how we load the foot. Because as soon as that foot makes an interaction with the ground, forces are coming back up the leg. And there's studies coming out showing the interactions of the foot, conformation, and lameness up higher up in the leg. So that's where the shoeing the athletic horse is really an important part. So it's all about understanding the function, how the foot functions, how it moves, how it lands, and how it transfers forces up through the leg. Now, how do you assess this? Okay. We're going to talk about that in a minute, right? So when we talk about the dynamic structure, the links, incorrect loading of the foot can lead you to problems, because at the end of the day, most of our horses will lead to repetitive strain injuries. They're not high-speed horses, so the eventers will possibly have high-speed injuries, but they'll also have a component of repetitive strain injuries. So that's dressage work, show jumping, doing the same exercise over and over again. We don't have high-speed injuries. So if we've got a foot that's abnormally balanced and not functioning properly, it's a reasonable assumption that's going to transfer back up the leg and cause you issues further up. We know there's been a study produced that shows the link between hind foot conformation, particularly the angle the bottom of the pedal bone makes, and the presence of hock soreness as a positive correlation. So they're linked, okay? It hasn't been linked with stifle and SI joints, but I'm sure it's only going to be a matter of time before we get to that point, okay? So a couple of things I want to, and this is where you guys as horse owners have to be aware. You have to think about what's happening with your farrier, and you work as part of a team. We're all part of the team. I'm part of your team. If I'm part of your team, or your other vet's part of your team, that's fine. also your farriers part of the team, and you guys have all got to talk, because at the end of the day, we're all working for the horse, and that's what we're trying to do. So first things first, if you're breeding foals, please, 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 the chance to fix angular limb deformities is early in life. You can't fix them when they're 5, 6, 7, 8 years of age. You can just accommodate them and deal with them. Fetlock needs to be addressed by 6 weeks, and the knees by 3 months of life. That is really important, and something I really encourage people, if you're breeding foals, to take a keen eye on. The ideal foal by 3 to 4 months will have a slightly turned out appearance, and you might say, well, we're always looking for straight legs, because as that foal grows, if it's slightly turned out, if you imagine my arms are sort of shoulders, as the shoulders grow and widen, what happens is the foal will end up turning like that and be straight. If you start with a straight foal like this at 3-6 months of life, as they grow and widen, there's a tendency for the feet to come in, and then you get a turned in conformation. And that's not ideal. I probably personally would rather have a slightly turned out than a turned in. But we do see a lot of horses either way and still stay sound. It's not a big problem. But you just want to get rid of the extremes at the end. So if we can compress them in and there's more in a small range, you'll be better for you guys going forward. How do you assess the horse? Well, look, I actually have to watch the horse. And so watching the horse and looking at the horse, how it's moving, how it's landing, you'll see this horse is just about to make impact. It has got a turned in conformation, and the outside of the foot's about to hit the ground before the inside. Okay, so when you look at this foot, there's actually collapse of the outside heel and flaring of the inside, and that accentuates the problem. So, well, you get that wider inside will start to drag that foot round more and more, and it's not what you want. You have to be careful with those horses. Now, here's another way to look at a horse. This was a horse I was doing a lameness exam, and the interesting thing about this horse is lame in one leg. He's lame as we look at it, the right front leg as we look at it, but it's the left front leg. If you look how little the fetlock drops compared to the other side, okay, that horse is guarding that limb. And we were just looking at this horse on the treadmill to show up some signs of lameness. He was actually very difficult to trot in hand, and he was easier to trot on the treadmill. So we trotted him on the treadmill, and we could see there, you know, quite easily that right front fetlock as it comes down now will drop right down, whereas the left front fetlock as it hits the ground doesn't. So I think it just had a question. No, we're all good. So let me just keep going here. So how do we assess the horse? Get on your hands and knees. Can everyone hear? Is there any problems with the sound? No. You really nearly need to get down on your hands and knees to look at a horse's foot. This horse I showed you before, the shoe ends here, and a lot of this heel is hanging over the back. That makes this horse very, very weak, and it's something you have to be aware of. And getting down your hands and knees and having a look at these feet is really, really important. And again, here, there's a horse, it's got a slight imbalance. You can see that there, the ground's actually sloping away, and this here is staying horizontal. So you can tell that there's a flaring on the outside of the foot and a crushing on the inside. Now, this can be addressed, and this really was addressed, and it makes a big difference. Again, watching your horses when they're standing around. This horse was just standing in the yard. This is a hind foot, I will be honest. But notice it doesn't want to load the heels, okay? It doesn't want to load its heels. It wants to put all its weight on front. There's stuff going on in this foot that means that this horse could be shod differently to accommodate it and make it more comfortable. Okay, this is where I have got my guest along. So I want to introduce you guys. I was very, very fortunate about 10, 11 years ago to meet a farrier from England called Haydn Price. Now, Haydn was very grateful to give up his time and have a chat to me. Due to time zone differences, he's based in Wales. He could not be live on here because he is being allowed to go back to work. So it's important to let him keep working. But Haydn's history is he's been the Team GB farrier, Great Britain farrier for 3 Olympic Games. And as you can see here, I don't need to tell you who he's the farrier to. Vallegro. He's been Carl Hester's farrier for over 10 years now, and he's intricately involved in a lot of research on foot, and specifically warm bloods. So that's all Haydn does is sport horses. He's just a sport horse farrier. And I was very lucky to be able to meet him 10, 11 years ago, and then he graciously gave up his time. So during the next part of the webinar, there will actually be some videos I've recorded with him. And I asked a question for everyone that's here. There will be an email coming out tomorrow night, and there will be a link to the 1 hour interview I did with Haydn. It was about 51 minutes. Haydn's got some great ideas, great thoughts, and this is all backed up by science. And he's really worked with this, and he's a really interesting gentleman. So I hope you enjoy listening to him. But if you have any questions during it, please speak up. So in this here video, before we started, the lead up to this here was I was asking Haydn about how he says, as vets, we deal with clinical records, we've got histories. Farriers, unfortunately, a little bit notorious for not keeping records, and Haydn's no different. But I just wanted you guys to listen how he assesses a foot and how their thought process behind it.
To be honest with you, it's multifactorial. I will use any evidence that is there, both visual and diagnostic. The thing for me, my foundation, my default position is always one of dynamics, because it's interesting that you say, you know, that I'm not a big fan of shoeing to a static radiograph, and absolutely no, I'm not. I mean, I would struggle to know how to shoe a horse with a static X-ray without seeing it move, because has it got a pair of feet? Is one foot completely different to the other one? And if it is, then that adds another dimension to it. So for me, the first thing is always movement, and it's always looking at the horse. It's also the holistic overview, the muscle structure. It is then once I've got that, I'm more than happy then to include things like radiographs. But the other thing, I think, for me really is about opening up and offering a proactive approach to shoeing rather than a reactive one, because I think we're all really, really good at reacting to when you know, horses either have poor performance issues or, God forbid, you know, they end up lame. But actually, how do you limit that? And again, it comes back down to movement. It comes back down to balance. It comes back down to making the horse as comfortable as possible. And in our world, it means that sometimes you shoe 2 feet completely differently. You know, to give the horse that foundation.
Okay, so as you can see, they take a little bit of a different approach, and Haydn's been very fortunate to work with some very high-level dressage horses. My lead into that question was about the fact that Haydn's well known for not being a massive fan of foot X-rays. He thinks they're part of the thing, but he doesn't make massive changes based on an X-ray. He makes changes based on how he sees a horse moving. Okay. I'm probably a little bit step back. I think the feet X-rays can be very beneficial and helpful, and I think it does give, especially the warm bloods, a thoroughbred foot's really easy to read, and most farriers would agree they can pick where the pedal bone is and where the movement is. But some of these warm bloods, although they look upright, can be a little bit like this horse here. They can actually be sunken back at the heel, and that isn't great for the horse. And if we can change that and work and combine that with how the horse moves, then it's going to be a lot more benefit. So, but this is always my take home from X-rays. And even when a couple of clients, I talk to them, I love them to bits, but people can get quite obsessed about a number. What's the angle of the pedal bone? And, you know, I think farriers break out in a cold sweat when they hear the vet's been to X-ray feet, because they don't know whether they're about to get sacked or not, or there's an issue. Okay. I think they're really just a snapshot in time, and you have to consider where you're taking them in the cycle. And some farriers will prefer them to take in the beginning of the cycle, some will prefer the end. And I think that's, again, a personal choice. I personally like towards the end of the cycle because I want to see where the horse is getting to. Okay, so I feel the horse spends more time away from being trimmed. So if you say your horse on a 5 weeks cycle or 6 weeks, say 6 week cycle, first 2 weeks, not much growth. And then when you start to get to 3, 4, 5, 6, you've got a long time. You're further away from that trim. And then you're getting back to the next trim. So I like to do them towards the end. Of course, in an ideal world, we would do them right at the end of the cycle, trim the foot, shoe the foot, re-x-ray. That's not realistic. You've got to get the best bang for your buck. I'm happy to do that if you want to do that, and we do sometimes do that, is make changes because we think there's really quite drastic changes needed. We'll x-ray right at the end, pull the shoes off, trim, re-x-ray, check it's all right. And especially for laminitic horses, sometimes we'll do that if we've got rotation, is do the pre and post trim x-rays. So which legs? All fronts, backs, all four. I think probably all four really, and there's not much difference in price. The other thing people ask me, how often do you do them? Well, I think if you've got a major problem, then I think it's only fair to give the farriers, somewhere 3 to 6 months to make a change. And we've got to think 3 months is only 2 shoeing cycles. And that's not really a long time. 6 months is probably 4. 4 is pretty good. We're starting to get there. So I think once every 12, 18 months for your horse, if you're happy, if it gets a clean, if it's got quite a normal hoof capsule, then it's a good way to have an assessment. How often, what age do you start? Look, I think really this is where Haydn mentioned that proactive approach. Bringing in your proactive approach at your 4-year-old or your 3-year-old, 4-year-old, if there's something there, it's really easy to fix. It's a lot easier to fix than when you try and fix something that's 12 and had a negative palmar angle for 8 years of its working life. It's really hard to fix. You almost just got to accept it and move on. So what are we looking at on an x-ray? Okay, by the way, you can ask questions as we go if anyone's got any queries or anyone wants any questions on what I've talked about. So first we look at the dorsal rotation. Obviously that's the laminitis type view. We're looking at the angles. Most horses won't show it, but you do find the odd horse that, like this horse here, has a 6 degrees of rotation, and this horse is perfectly sounded in full work. The horse was actually purchased with this and was known that it had been there for 3 years already. So some horses will have a degree of rotation. This was due to a laminitis episode as a younger horse, as an 8-year-old, and the horse is still going really well. And I don't think there's any issues due to his feet. There's a recipe for keeping his feet balanced, and it works well for that horse. So that's the first thing we look at. Most horses will be 0 because there'll be nice parallel lines. Then your palmar or plantar angle. So just to separate palmar from a veterinary perspective is the front feet. So it's your palms. Plantar is the bottom of your feet, and it's the hind feet. So that's where it comes across. We get the palmar and plantar angles. Ideally, we're looking for somewhere in sort of 3 to 4 degrees angle. In an ideal world. Ideal, I say, but not always possible. So we're looking at there. That's really important to have a look at and part of the process. This horse here is -7 degrees. Now that's quite an extreme. In fairness, this is a hind foot, and hind foot have a tendency to be a lot more negative if they're going to be negative. So it is something we keep an eye on. Okay, next. The balance through the coffin joint. Now, this is sometimes a little bit hard to explain. What we're talking about here is as the foot lands and hits the ground, this here extensor process of the pedal bone will rotate up and round and come up here. So the rotation through the coffin joint. What we're wanting to know is when that foot interacts with the ground, what percentage of the foot is behind this line, vertical line through the center rotation, and what percentage is forward. Ideally, we're looking for 60-40, okay, in an ideal world. So this horse here is actually 36%, okay, so it's a little bit less. The nice thing about this balance through the coffin joint is we can actually, with the farrier, doesn't matter how much foot or how little foot we've got, we can actually play with that quite easily. How we do that, as you can see here, This shoe is not rolled at the toe. It's quite a straight toed shoe. So we're talking about our interaction with the ground. So as this horse loads its heels, we need to increase this here and decrease that there. Simple way to do that. Bring the shoes back a little bit more. If we can get 5-6 mils back here, will make a massive difference. And if you roll this toe, so just getting the farrier to grind it off, you know, the old, not the old school, but we call the natural balance style of shoe. You know, the shoes are quite wide at the toe, they have a big rollover. You just grind that shoe back a bit. All of a sudden, the interaction of the ground comes to here. We add a little bit of length here. We're quite easily over the 40%, and you'll get that foot a lot balanced, and it'll allow the more weight to come through this here and not be crushed into a small area. So we're trying to change how the force interacts with the foot, because obviously as the horse lands in this area, you've got all the major things you don't want to damage. Your navicular bone, your deep digital flexor, your sesamoidian ligaments, those are all important. So that's what we're looking at there. It really is one of the simplest ones to change and play with, and it's by adding extra length to the back of the shoe. Now I warn you, once you start doing that there, because unfortunately for a lot of us, we judge a farrier by how long it keeps a set of shoes on. You know, does it make the 5 weeks or the 6 weeks? If they pull shoes all the time, you think, God hell, what's going on here? Once we put length out the back, I warn you, your horse almost needs to live in bell boots. It really does, because there's no way that horse can, it's more prone. It's more prone to collapsing down. So, okay. So, just 1 second. So we look at this here. They will pull a shoe. Okay. I just had a really good question, and I will deal with it. Okay. And I'm just thinking how I answer this question. Okay. So you've got this here horse is minus, I'm going that way. Sorry. Balance. And then we've got this foot here. This is a perfectly balanced foot. No shoe on. We can see it's got great heel structure. That line is parallel with that line. It's got a really good heel structure. When we split down the middle through here, when we split down through here, we've got 44% of the foot behind the line and only 56 in front. This is just textbook. It's textbook shoe, textbook foot. Nothing special really needs to be done to it. Okay. So I had a question, which I think is a very good question, and it is something that for some people who might be clients, and I know a lot of you aren't clients here, and I welcome you. The question is, do wedges make a difference? I don't like wedges. I just don't like wedges as a long-term solution to a problem. And the reason for that is the reason you're using a wedge is because you've got a negative angle. So if we go back here, okay, so we'll use this foot as an example. Okay, so there's a great question. I can see from here that this heel is drawing over the back of this foot. Okay, it's dropping down. We've got a 2.8 degree. It's not bad palmar angle. It's actually not. It could be better. We know we're going to need more support at the back of the foot. So we say, well, we're 2.8. Why don't we just put a wedge on it? Well, if you look at this foot, if you could look at this foot, and if we had a picture of it, you'd see the hoof tubules running in like that. Okay, so from the heel, they're running in like that. If I apply force direct up into them by using a wedge and getting me a nice picture, what happens is I actually force those horn tubules even more horizontally. So I personally, wedges are great for a short-term fix. So if you've got deep digital flexor pain or something like that there, that you need to take the pressure off it, then yeah, wedges are great. But keeping them on long term is not going, it's actually going to hurt you in the long term, I believe, because they put pressure on those horn tubules and they just get bent up and the issue gets worse and worse. It's probably personally not a big fan of it. I would much rather play. So this foot here is flat, okay? It's got a flat or 1 degree palmar angle. I would much rather accept that palmar angle and get more importance on changing this here forces, where the forces are going. Because if you can get this foot functioning properly and the forces being spread out a bit more, you'll find the horn tubules will come up. And so that's really important. And that is something you have to look at. So great question. And yeah, I'm just not a big fan of wedges. Okay, so someone said people barefoot trimming. I have no problem with horses working with shoes, without shoes. I don't have a personal preference on it. Shoes are there for a reason. We use them for grip and we use them for wear. So when a horse is not able to cope working in a sand arena without, getting footsore, I'm sorry, but I just feel you just use shoes. I don't have a problem with that. So it is kind of I know it's a very emotive subject for a lot of people, barefoot, shoeing, traditional. I don't think there's much different. If you get the function of the foot right, you can do whatever you want. And I think some very good farriers get quite cross about this sort of barefoot trimming thing. But if you've got the foot trimmed and balanced and the horse can cope without shoes, then most farriers would say don't put shoes on. It's only if it's just once I see that, people getting a little bit obsessive about it and not keeping and trying to keep the horse going with hoof boots and not being able to compete or perform because of that. So hope that answers it. Okay, so let's move on. So we've covered that there. Medial lateral imbalance. So what we're looking for is the balance through the coffin joint. So if you see here, this inside's slightly shorter than the outside, and there's a slight tip on the angle. Now, this is not too bad. This is pretty good. So it's only 2 degrees variation through the joint. Now, if we look at this horse, the pastern joint is at a 10-degree angle, and the coffin joint is at a 7-degree angle. Now, we know that this will be placing abnormal forces on the inside, crushing this inside of the joint, and we're just setting ourselves up for arthritis issues down the track. So again, this is where I think x-rays can be beneficial. But of course, a horse like this, we go back to what Haydn was talking about, is looking at the dynamics. This horse, when it moves, landed really unevenly and needed help to try and land properly. And then we can start to correct these issues. We don't get the collapsing of the joints as much, and we can get the hoof caps to start functioning a bit better. So, when's it time to accept it? And that is a question we sometimes see older horses, and I'll accept this foot. Now, this foot is on a 16-year-old show jumper. The horse is jumping. The horse has been competing. The horse is sound. Okay, it's a really ugly foot. Let's be honest. It's a very upright, boxy foot that's had it all its life. Now, it doesn't matter what we do. We could be doing more harm to that horse because the horse is accommodating it. We need to shoe the horse just for comfort and accept the foot. So at that point in time, I'd say to people, you have to just accept it. You can't change that. You can't accept that. The other foot on this horse is quite normal, a normal looking foot. You've got to just accept that. You can't keep going. You can't keep trying to change things. And from a veterinary perspective, as soon as you start changing this 16-year-old horse, you will cause problems further up the limb. And it is really important. You have to be careful not to keep changing those things too much. So this is where I'm talking with Haydn about shoeing for performance. I'll let this play, and I hope I answer questions at the end of it.
I wanted to sort of touch back. I listened to a podcast. You talked about your dressage horses and your high performance work, and obviously you work with some very high profile horses, had great results. You talked about looking at horses' movements in the Grand Prix test, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you talked about pirouettes and stuff like that there.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, with your team, was that come about from your team discussion about really pulling every performance apart? Is that just the ultimate high-level Team GB approach to how you improved horses? Is that what you guys did, or was it just, you know, how did you guys approach that? How was it sort of identified?
What we do is we have a multi-practice approach to it. So each person or each sector will be seeing the same thing. So we'll have the saddler. We'll be looking to see what's happening from a saddlery point of view. The vet will be looking at it. The physio will be looking at it, and the farrier will be looking at it. But then we break it down into our own department. Then, so for me, when I'm looking at performance, I'm looking at dressage at a high level. I'm looking at a number of things, and not necessarily the feet, I might add, because then this is where your dynamics come into play. So I'm looking at individual lever arms, i.e. the limbs. I'm looking at their position. I'm looking to see where the body is in relation to that, in conjunction with its conformation, especially on the hind limb. I'm looking to see what the loading parameters are for the movements as well. Because as you will know, it affects that different things can affect not only the swing or the flight phase, but actually the stance phase. Massively important. Something that's been overlooked, I think, in farrier is how farrier can affect the stance phase of these high performance horses. So the time of which that foot is engaged with the ground. Why is that important? Well, if you take a pirouette, for example, a pirouette to the left, pirouette to the right, you're expecting 650 kilos plus, with some of these bigger horses, 750 kilos, to rotate on one limb. If it's going to rotate on that limb, the limb needs to be in the right position, number one. So the point of ground contact relative to that movement is absolutely crucial. So if you've got a horse that has a hind limb rotation, let's say take cow hop, for example, and the left is cow hop slightly more than the right, it means that it's going to affect the swing phase. When it affects the swing phase, the aerial phase, it can also mean that it comes underneath the center of the mass of the body, center of mass, a little bit too far. So now you've got a lever arm that essentially is leaning. Now you're expecting the horse to rotate on that, to sit back and rotate on that lever arm. But the lever arm is in the wrong position. It's in the wrong position because of its conformation. Maybe in the pelvis, maybe somewhere else, maybe in the hock. So what you can do then is you then can apply a shoeing methodology that accepts the horse's conformation, because we don't want to change that. That's how the horse loads, how the horse is made. But what we want to affect is the loading parameters through the limb. What that equates to, in terms from a rider's perspective, is power output. So if you have a lever arm that is more upright, and you then can increase the push, so you have more push off, you have more power. If the lever arm is angled when it comes into contact with the ground, and then when the horse sits backwards and rotates on it, it means you have less power output. So by adapting to the shoeing and creating a platform that accommodates it, but you don't try to do anything about it, merely means that horse now has more power. And it's one of the things that over the last sort of, 25 years, these are the sort of things that the terminology that riders would say to you. You decide to put a bit of a lateral extension on, or you decide to change the profile relative to the higher limb. When you're looking at these horses move and looking at the individual joints and seeing what the hock is doing, and they come back and they say, "Oh God, this horse is so much more powerful." Well, you haven't increased the power. All you've done is stabilize the limb.
Yeah.
And that's the proactive approach to shoeing, because it's a double-edged sword, really, that if you don't do it, you have uneven loading through the joints. You have a potential then of a horse trying to compensate for that. But then you've got repetitive strain injury then that creates some of the pathology and the problems that we see later on. So for me, it's quite standard, really. You just look at something, you look at the limb, you look at the individual joints as it's being loaded, whether it be in front or behind, and you say, well, actually, I think we need to do A, B, C, D. And that's sort of how I approach that.
Okay, so I think I asked Hayden the question about how they assessed it. Team GB, for anyone who doesn't know, I've followed what they've done. They've had great results, first of all, competition, but they've also been a very proactive team in how they identify horses and how they manage them and how they integrate every member of that team into the circle with the horse in the middle, horse and the rider in the middle. So everyone's working physio, farrier work. I know they created their own girth for the Olympics that wasn't released until after the Olympics to try and remove freedom. All those things they worked on, and it's also a lot of it's science-based. So that's why I asked Hayden specifically about that. For anyone that loves, a lot of people have asked, what is the podcast that I listen to? Because I've mentioned it a few times. It's American Farriers Journal, episode 3, or you can Google Haydn Price on YouTube. And honestly, Hayden's one of these gentlemen. He doesn't even have a Facebook profile. And I had to contact him the old school way by giving him a ring. So there's not a lot about Hayden out there, but he's exceptionally good and very kind with his time. So how can you assess your horse for yourself? Okay, because these are things that it's okay to talk about, a Grand Prix horse doing, pirouettes. We're all dreaming. A lot of us are dreaming to get there, to get to that level, or show jumping $1.60 m. But I think a lot of it, as you as an owner, we've got so many tools available, your photographs, your videos, even your coaches. Is there a weakness one way, the other way of movement? Is there something your farrier can help you with? And those are all things that you've got to start, I think, dotting your I's and crossing your T's. It's those little 1% things that can make a difference. So as you get up the grades, is there something a horse really struggles with? Now, I don't talk about it on here, but on the YouTube video, Hayden gives a little tip for the upright footed horse, which I thought was very, very interesting. And so do have a watch of that. It's the last bit of the video. But anyway, so what you can do, working with your coach, your farrier, vet, me, or whoever it is, and the physio, to put that place, is there something that keeps recurring, or is there something you can do to improve it? So you've got a young horse, obviously they're not going to be doing complicated movements, but is that horse able to balance itself on a circle? Okay. So even a young horse, people say to me, the circle of death, as we all know, pre-purchase. When you're selling a horse, you hate the sight of it. When you're buying a horse, you love to see them go around beautifully on it. Well, a young dressage horse should learn to be able to go around that circle. Can they balance themselves around it? How do they place their foot? Does it land flat? Does it not? Are they tipping on the inside? Are they tipping on the outside? Are they more comfortable one way or the other way? Why? Is it because you've got a problem, or is it because how we're landing? So not every horse, maybe, like, they don't have to be lame on the circle, but they can be uncomfortable. Are they better one way or the other way? Why is that? And I know, talking to a lot of coaches, they find that, even themselves, you're better one way, other way. Why? And if you can start to ask those questions, I think you can really help your horse. And then when it comes to the feet, keeping photographs. We've all got smartphones nowadays. Got my dinosaur sticker. Very professional looking, I think. But anyway, it's keeping pictures, recording them, dates, times, what are they doing, getting down on your hands and knees. Don't take a photograph bent down. You need to be on the ground. I'm sorry, you have to be down on your hands and knees to get a good photograph. Get down there and assess those there. And it allows you to start creating a profile for your horse and watch it over time. So you can get on your computer screen, or there's plenty of apps that can link photos together. You put 4 photos in one thing. Well, the left front foot over the last 12 months, what's it done? Well, 12 months ago it looked like this, now it looks like this, and now it looks like this, and now Okay, it's changing. Why is it changing? What's happening? Are you intending for the change to happen, or is it a negative change? Well, then you need to discuss it and you work out. When it comes to movements, is the horse not placing its thing? As Haydn talks, I think that's fascinating to just go to that level where you're actually trying to change how a horse places its foot for specific movement. Now, we talk about power, and I think that's really sensible. Talking about, you know, getting those lever arms working in straight lines just allows you to drive straight up and drive through. So I think those are all important things you need to look at. So coming near the end of this talk, so I just want some take homes for you. I know it hasn't been depths of detail about foot injuries or stuff like that there, but I really want to challenge you guys to really think about the foot, what you can do to help your horse, and how you can get other people to help you do that. You know, it's not just the farrier, it's working out what's going on. Is, you know, your coaches to help, how's the horse placing its leg. Coaches are expertly placed to sort of, that's what they do. They watch where the movement is, where's the horse sitting, where's it not doing, why is it not doing that? So it's a dynamic structure of the foot. It changes all the time. You've got to work with it. And because something's working today doesn't mean it's going to work tomorrow. But equally, something that didn't work today might work in 12 months' time because the foot has changed. You've got something to a point. Your videos, your slow-mo videos. Apple does great slow-mo videos. Just get on your hands and knees and record your horse walking towards it. You have to be on your hands and knees though. Again, see how the horse lands. Is it landing flat? You know, it's hard when they're trotting or cantering. I don't want you to lie in front of your horses or get someone to lie in front of your horse while you're doing a medium trot towards them. Don't think that's the safest for anyone. But then the other take home I want you guys to accept as well is with these older horses, yes, we're always aiming to try and get them back to more normal. So a horse that's very flat-footed, we're always going to be trying to build them up and stand them up and work that. We're never going to get them perfect. We just got to accept it, move on, and just be aware of it and keep addressing it. So once again, Lara Tweedy has offered, this time it's off store-wide, 25%, and the code is store25, and that's until midnight tomorrow night. So it is a very short one, but store25 until tomorrow night. So the next webinar, because I am going to put up a poll in a minute, and you can ask, first of all, has anyone any questions? Silence is deafening. Either you've all gone to sleep or you're all drunk. So anyway, the next webinar is in a month's time on Thursday, 25th of June. And it's on the other parts of the foot, the common conditions we deal with, how to diagnose them, how to treat them, and the long-term outcome of these horses as we track them over time. I'm going to open up the poll now, and you guys can choose whatever you want. I've just launched it now, so you can just vote for a couple of minutes. It's just to give me ideas of what you want to talk about. I plan to keep these webinars going once a month. I think more than that, it's quite a lot of work, as you can understand, to get them done. But we're aiming for once a month to do them, because I think I quite enjoy doing them, and I quite enjoy presenting about them. They are all saved on YouTube. If you search for Tweedy and Associates Equine, they're on YouTube, and you can watch them at any time, share them with friends, with your farrier, with your vet. I don't really mind. I don't have a problem. I know a couple of farriers have messaged me and got access to videos because they wanted to watch them because people have been talking to them. So I'm really pleased you've all enjoyed it. So it's been really great to have you here. And if I can be of any help to any of you, please message me or give me a ring. I'm happy to help you. So I'm really appreciative of everyone coming. And hopefully we can see you again, back again. So it's really good, and we'll do a bit more detail. But as I said, there will be a link to the Haydn Price interview. It is quite long. I plan to actually release it also on podcast, because I think it really is, you don't really need to see it. Neither Haydn or myself are the most photogenic people in the world, so listening to us is probably a bit better. And you can have a listen to that. I'll release the podcast. If you follow me on Instagram or YouTube, I'll let you, or YouTube or Facebook, I will let you know when that is all happening. So thank you very much for doing the poll. I'm going to close that off now. And it looks like back and sacroiliac joint is number 1 on the list. It's coming next after this one. So that's quite an interesting one. It's quite an in-depth one. So I really appreciate you guys coming again. And once again, I will see you in 4 weeks' time, hopefully. So thank you very much. And I'll speak to you guys soon. Thank you. Bye.